Hi, Econ students. It's concept 6.4. We're looking at the effects of policies and economic conditions on the foreign exchange market. In other words, we're looking at shifters of demand and supply in the foreign exchange market. Here's the good news. Whenever you have a shift in the demand of one good, or one currency, I should say, not good, you're going to have a shift in the supply of the other currency. They always go in the same direction. So if I demand more of currency, then I'm going to have to supply more of my domestic currency. And if I demand less of a foreign currency, then I'm going to supply less of my domestic currency. Why? Because it's an exchange. In order to get a good, I have to supply my currency and demand their currency whenever I'm purchasing an import. You keep that in mind, keep that straight, you should be in pretty good shape. So let's get into these shifters. First, real quick recap. Remember, we have a foreign exchange rate here. We're looking at the market for a currency. So when the demand goes up for this currency, it's not going up for the good, it's going up for the currency of that good. And when the price rises, as it does here, that is called appreciation. It means the price of the dollar has gone up. In other words, it costs more of a foreign currency to buy that dollar. That is appreciation. And vice versa. When the price falls, we call that depreciation because the dollar is weaker. It takes fewer foreign dollars to buy one American dollar. That's the idea there. So that's the market. Keep that straight. So the first determinant or shifter is change in taste for foreign goods or foreign changes in their taste for our goods, right? That's going to impact the demand for our goods or their goods, which impacts the demand for the currency. The demand for the good and the currency are directly related. If we demand more of a good, we're going to demand more of the currency, right? Because in order to get that good, I have to supply my currency and get their currency in order to make that exchange. So a change in taste means I want more of a foreign good. So let's say I want more, I don't know, British fish. So in the United States, we demand more British fish. Well, in order to get those fish, we have to supply American dollars and demand British pounds, right? So the demand for the foreign currency or the British pound is going to go up. Demand is going to shift to the right. So if demand is shifting right for the foreign currency, what is happening to that currency? Well, it's actually appreciating in value relative to the American dollar, right? Because it takes more dollars to buy 1 euro because we want their goods, so we demand more of their currency. Got it? And in America, the opposite is true. If I demanded that fish, I had to supply American dollars to do it. That's what we as American citizens do. When we buy an import on Amazon or whatever, we click buy. That is the supply of American dollars going up. We're supplying it to the foreign exchange market. So when I demand more of that good and demand more British pounds, I have to supply more American dollars. Now, when supply shifts right, the price of the American dollar falls. In other words, it takes fewer British pounds to buy one American dollar, which means that the dollar has depreciated relative to the foreign currency. Okay? Every single time it's a double shift. You won't always have to show the double shift, but every time it's a double shift. Okay? The next shifter, they'll get a little more complicated from here. Relative income change. In the event that the United States income rises faster than foreign income. Now, be clear here. When I say income, I don't mean like the money you bring home individually. We're talking about the income of a nation, aka GDP or nominal GDP or real GDP, right? So when income is rising, when the American economy is booming, we will buy more of everything. That includes buying more imports. And if we're growing at a faster rate or we have a higher GDP than the foreign nation, then we can consider them to be, for example, in a recession, then they're going to be buying fewer of our goods. So if you're catching this, we're buying more imports, they're buying fewer exports. That matters. So if I demand more of those imports from that foreign nation, then remember the demand for the goods and the demand for the dollar or the currency are directly related. So if I want more of the goods, I want more of the currency. So when I want more of that foreign good, because I have more money, might as well buy some imports as well, then the demand for that currency will go with it, which means the demand will have a shift right for that foreign currency. When demand shifts right for the foreign currency, there is going to be an appreciation of that currency relative to the American dollar. When that happens, we know that there has to be depreciation of the American dollar relative to that foreign currency. That's just how it works, right? If it appreciates, then I must be depreciating. Okay, that's the connection there. How am I or why am I depreciating? Remember, when I want more of those foreign goods, more imports, because I have more money, I have to supply more American dollars. I have to supply American dollars to buy imports. When supply shifts right, the price of the American dollar falls, it depreciates relative to the foreign currency. So, same idea, double shift here, but it's happening because our GDP is rising at a greater rate than foreign nations. Just keep that in mind. The income is rising at a faster rate, then we're going to demand more of everything, right? Because our economy is doing well, including more of imports from those foreign nations or more foreign goods. Okay, ready for even more complexity? Here we go. Interest rates. Okay, so what are we talking about with interest rates? Well, when interest rates rise, they impact our capital flow. We'll talk about this again a little bit later on, but they impact our capital flow. What we mean by that is when interest rates rise, that's going to result in an increase in inflow because our assets, our interest bearing assets like bonds, are going to be much more attractive. As a result, more money comes into the United States. That money is exchanged. So if they're demanding our bonds, they're demanding our currency. If they're demanding our currency, demand is going to shift right. It's going to appreciate our currency. Their supply is going to shift right as well, depreciating their currency. And that's where we land, all based on interest rates. So this connects 6.1 to 6.4. So let's frame this for you. Let's say the foreign interest rate is rising faster than the US. So in Norway, they have an interest rate that's at 12%, and in the United States we have an interest rate of 3%, for example. If that's the case, then we're going to want more foreign currencies so that we can purchase foreign assets, right? I want the 12% bond from Norway. So I'm going to supply American dollars and I'm going to demand Norwegian currency in order to buy that asset. So I demand more of the asset and I demand more of the currency. So the demand shifts right for that foreign currency. That foreign currency appreciates relative to the dollar. And of course, in order to get that currency, I had to supply American dollars, so the American dollar is going to depreciate relative to the foreign currency. And for all of these, the opposite is true as well. The American interest rate went up higher than the foreign, then they're going to want more of our bonds. So the demand for our currency is going to go up. So our currency is going to appreciate, which means that their currency is going to depreciate, right? So you can always reverse this depending on who has the higher interest rate or who has the higher income or who has the change in taste. One more for you. Relative inflation change. Inflation. Yes, inflation actually impacts foreign exchange because even though inflation's happening domestically in our nation, the prices carry over into the foreign markets. So let's say the price of an American, I don't know, tennis shoes, pair of shoes goes up exponentially in the United States, right? Price of shoes and price of everything has doubled. But now a pair of Nike shoes costs $120 when before it cost 60. Okay, but that's with everything in America. When those shoes are exported to a foreign market, they're going to cost $120. They're going to look more expensive. Now their incomes didn't rise at the same rate. They aren't experiencing inflation, so that looks relatively more expensive because nothing else rose in price around them. None of their domestic goods did, just the goods from America. That's what we're talking about with inflation. So think of it this way: inflation carries over into the foreign markets and impacts how expensive or inexpensive a good looks. Okay, if you keep that straight, you should be fine. So if the US price level rises faster in a foreign nation, we have greater inflation than the other nations. Then the demand for foreign products is going to go higher because they're going to look relatively less expensive. All of the American goods have gone up in price. Yikes. But the imports from Japan, for example, look relatively cheaper because they don't have inflation in Japan. And remember, inflation, those prices carry over into the foreign markets. So I might as well buy the Japanese goods instead of the American goods. So demand for that foreign product is going to go up. When demand goes up for that foreign product, the demand for the foreign currency goes up. When demand for their foreign currency goes up, their currency appreciates relative to the dollar, and the dollar depreciates relative to the foreign currency. Again, keep in mind, inflation is all about price level and how expensive our exports look. If we're inflating at a higher rate, then our exports look more expensive and their imports look cheaper. If our inflation is increasing at a lower rate than a foreign nation, then our exports look cheaper and their imports look more expensive. Okay? All right. So let's try this out. What will happen to the international value of the American peso if there is high inflation in Mexico? I said American peso, Mexican peso. If there's high inflation in Mexico, what's going to happen? Well, it actually looks like this, and both of these are going to cause depreciation. The peso is going to depreciate. You're like, wait, why is there a double shift here? What's going on? Well, first, the demand is going to decrease because when there's high inflation in Mexico, those foreign nations don't want to buy those higher price exports. So they're going to demand less Mexican exports or fewer Mexican exports, which is going to decrease the demand for the peso. If they demand less of our exports, they're going to demand less of our currency that goes along with it. So demand is going to shift to the left. However, at the same time, supply is going to go up because the Mexicans are going to look to buy the lower price imports. Domestically, they're going to look around and say, hey, this ain't good. We don't want to buy our Mexican products. They're really highly priced. But the imports from that foreign nation are super low. So I want to buy those. And so supply shifts to the right. Right? So as a result of demand shifting left and supply shifting right, we don't know what the quantity of pesos is going to be. That's indeterminate because quantity went up and then quantity went down. But we do know that the exchange rate is going to go down. And when the exchange rate goes down, we have depreciation of the currency. Double shift, right? Not only does the demand for our goods change with inflation, but the supply of our currency is going to change because we're going to buy more of the imported goods that are relatively cheaper. I know that's kind of a roundabout logic. We'll practice this over and over again. It'll be just fine, I promise you. All right. What's more common is something that looks like this. So let's try this out. I'll make my head real small. There we go. So it says Japan has a large budget deficit that increases the interest rates. Okay. And we're going to put this, we're going to look at two markets. We're going to look at the currency market for the American dollar and the currency market for the Japanese yen, right? Now remember, the price is always foreign over domestic or Fordham. So this is going to be foreign currency, which is yen, over domestic, which is dollar. There we go. And then this is going to be the quantity of the dollar. Over here, the foreign currency for the yen is going to be the American dollar. So it's going to be dollars, $4 over yen. And then down here is going to be quantity of yen. And we're good to go. Now we know that all of these graphs always start with a demand and supply curve, and they're just normal, downward sloping, upward sloping, equilibrium. And this gives us, we always just refer to these as exchange rates, so ER1. Sometimes you'll see that as like 5 yen per dollar or 3 yen per dollar, something like that. We just use ER when you're graphing it out, unless they give you a specific number. Let's do that over here as well. Demand, supply, equilibrium, ER1, and quantity 1. Okay, so if Japan has a large budget deficit, increases the interest rate. The key word here is increases the interest rate. That's what we care about, right? If it's an increase in interest rate, we know that this right here is a determinant, a shifter. And so whose interest rates are going up? Well, Japan's interest rates are going up. So I know IRs are going up right here. What's that mean? Well, we're sitting over here in America and we're like, look at those interest-bearing assets from Japan. They're paying 10, 15, 20% interest. I want those, not my current yen or my current foreign domestic bonds and assets that pay a much lower interest rate. We are attracted to higher interest rates in the asset market. So with those high interest rates, the demand for yen is going to go up. Why? Demand for yen is going up because we want more of their interest bearing assets in America. As a result, the exchange rate is going to go up. And the quantity is going to go up. There you have it. So what has happened to the Japanese yen? It is appreciated, which means that the American dollar is going to do what? You got it, is going to depreciate. So why is it going to depreciate? Well, in order to get those interest-bearing assets and in order to get the yen to buy those interest-bearing assets, we have to supply American dollars. Remember, it's an exchange. We have to supply something to exchange it. So supply is going to shift to the right. I'm going to increase my supply to this exchange market. As a result, we have a new exchange rate, ER2, and we have a new quantity, Q2. What happened to the American dollar? The American dollar depreciated. That's really it, right? Double shift. Supply will always shift in the same direction as demand. And then just, hey, are we demanding more of their goods? Who's demanding more of whose goods? Or who's demanding more of whose assets? If you get that straight, shift the demand, shift the corresponding supply, you're in good shape. It is just as accurate, just as accurate to look at this at who's demanding less instead of more. So if interest rates are going up in Japan, then Japan might buy fewer American bonds. So I could show demand shifting to the left and supply shifting to the left. That is just as accurate. Both of them will result in the proper amount or the proper appreciation or depreciation. So either way is totally fine to do it. I think it's easier to think about appreciation, think about demand going up for a good or an asset than kind of the other way around. But both of them are accurate. Okay, let's keep going. Concept 6.5. Be super fast. Last one for this video. For concept 6.5, appreciation and depreciation actually impacts net exports as a secondary impact. First, we have the appreciation or depreciation. Secondarily, it impacts net exports. And that's a big deal because net exports impacts aggregate demand, and aggregate demand impacts GDP, which can impact our recession or inflationary gains. Big deal, right? But the currency appreciates. Here's the logic. Exports are more expensive than foreign markets, right? My currency appreciated, which means that when they go to buy my goods, it costs them more of their foreign currency to buy my American goods. So my exports look relatively more expensive. As a result, net exports will fall. There's an inverse relationship. When currency appreciates, net exports fall. Demand for the dollar decreases as a result of a decrease in those exports, and then the currency depreciates. Wait, what? You just said currency appreciated, and then currency depreciates? Yes. It self corrects, it self stabilizes. In the event that our currency appreciates, it's going to negatively impact our exports, which means net exports are going to go down. When net exports go down, that means foreign nations are demanding less of our goods. So the demand for our currency is going to go down, and the currency is going to depreciate, and it has a self stabilizing effect. So this is why our currency, even though exports and imports are happening constantly, our currency stays relatively stable unless acted upon by some extreme outside force. Okay, if the currency depreciates, the complete opposite is true. Depreciation means that imports are more expensive. My currency is worth less. So I'm not going to buy those imports because those look more expensive. It takes more American dollars to buy one of those imported goods. Exports in foreign markets are cheaper though, right? They see those exports from America, their currency has appreciated in value, so it takes fewer of their currencies to buy an American good. So they want the cheaper product. So net exports are going to rise as a result. So when our currency depreciates, exports go up, aggregate demand goes up, GDP goes up. So you start to see why China has been intentionally depreciating their currency for the last decade, right? Because when they do that, net exports rise. As a result of the increasing net exports, though, the demand for money is going to go up. When people want more of our goods, they want more of our currency. And when the demand for that money goes up, the currency then appreciates, getting us back to relative stability. It's not always back to the exact same exchange rate. So remember, this export shift is always secondary, right? First is the original appreciation, depreciation. Secondarily is the impact on net exports, aggregate demand, and GDP. And then know that if you keep on going down that line, in the long run, your currency will stabilize. Okay, let's do one final one here. And this one, we're just going to do Japan. Japan. And we're going to do the yen. And this is going to be foreign over domestic, so it's going to be dollar over yen. Because for this one, we're using the yen market. That's our domestic currency right there. This is quantity of yen. And then you know that this is price level, and this is GDP. We start with just regular demand and supply, and that gives us our original exchange rate and original quantity, Q1. Then over here, we have aggregate demand and aggregate supply. And we'll just keep LRAS out of it for now because it doesn't really matter. There we go. So if American tourists increase visits to Japan, what's going to happen? Well, if more people are coming to Japan, they need Japanese currency for their visit, right? The demand for the Japanese yen is going to go up. When demand goes up, we have a new exchange rate and our currency has appreciated, right? It went up. It costs more American dollars to buy 1 yen as a result. If it has appreciated, what's going to happen to net exports? Net exports are actually going to fall, right? Because now the Japanese goods look relatively more expensive. So we're going to buy fewer of those Japanese goods. So their exports are going to fall. When exports fall, remember that's the IXIN of SIG-JIXIN for aggregate demand. That means aggregate demand is going to fall. So aggregate demand will shift to the left, decreasing GDP and price level. If you wanted to get crazy, you would then do a third shift, and that third shift would be, okay, now that this is going down, then of course, demand is going to shift back to the left and stabilize our economy. Okay, that's it for this section. You are almost done. Friends, do the Khan Academy, and I will see you soon.